This film is about buses. More important, it's about ideas and attitudes, about societies and institutions. All that you will see and hear relates to man's spirit, which has endured out of compassion and through sacrifice. The year was 1939. The place, the New York World's Fair. The purpose, to show what perfect and beautiful things were coming by 1960. Millions of people saw and marveled at these predictions, agreed and accepted the fundamental point of view expressed here. Namely, science and technology will solve all of man's problems. Listen.
Get a glimpse into the future of this unfinished world of ours. There has been created for the New York World's Fair a thought-provoking exhibit of the developments ahead of us. The greater and better world of tomorrow that we in America are building today have arrived in this wonder world of 1960. The World's Fair exhibit, modeled with such artistry and skill that we must continually remind ourselves the world we are now seeing is a vision, an artistic conception as it develops into the great realities of tomorrow. Sunshine, trees, hills and valleys, flowers and flowing streams. This world of tomorrow is a world of beauty. These eternal things, wrought by God, are lovely and unchanging. Here is a highway intersection, highway engineering at its most spectacular. This superb one-direction highway, with its 7 lanes accommodating traffic at designated speeds of 50, 75, and 100 miles an hour, is engineered for easy grades and for speed with safety. The highway surface is automatically lighted by continuous tubing in the highway safety curbing, which evenly illuminates the road surface. And now we see a great river city of 1960. Residential, commercial, and industrial areas all have been separated for greater efficiency and greater convenience. A vast circular airport is close to the city with a giant dirigible hangar so that it can be turned easily to meet any wind direction. It is resting in a pool of liquid. The parks of the city have continuity, proper placement. These areas are united into long green strips surrounding each community. Along both banks of the river, beautifully landscaped parks replace the outworn areas of an older day. On all express city thoroughfares, the rights of as to displace outmoded business sections and undesirable slum areas whenever possible. Man continually strives to replace the old with the new. Rich in sunshine is the city of 1960. Fresh air, fine green parkways, recreational and civic centers. Modern and efficient city planning, breathtaking architecture, each city block a complete unit in itself. Does it seem strange? Unbelievable? Remember, this is the world of 1960.
But what happened when we went all out to improve, to expand, to perfect the world we live in? The formula didn't work. Something went wrong. Mankind and pure science didn't mix. The direction confused us and didn't deliver the promises it had made. Out of it all, man came to gather in great quantities, in cities. Rural America, with all its historical roots, was giving way, dispersing itself to the crowded crush of the city. Today, 53% of Americans are squeezed together on 0.7% of our land. 7 out of 10 Americans live and work in the cities. Prediction from the computer. In the next century, 9 out of 10 will. To the outsider, the city is a place of inconvenience, confusion, danger. It is hard to see and feel the human values. Man experiences the competition a city demands, and he may be ruthless. He hears of the compromises that can benefit the city, yet he may appear to be indifferent. It has been said that the real problem of the city is simple. No one really believes in it. That nobody in his right mind should live there. That the battle of the city is the battle nobody expects to win. The intelligent plan is this: work to make enough money in the city to move out, to the suburbs, to escape the noise, the pollution, the violence. But whether a man dines in splendor or takes his lunch in haste, whether he lives in a tree-studded, sweet-smelling suburb or endures the steaming asphalt jungle, he is linked and locked in this tumble with his fellow man. The effect of being able to live harmoniously with each other is not solved by amputation. So, for possibly this reason, men instinctively feel that the city must be saved. Cities have existed before recorded history. They are the bridges between generations. Their ruins are history. The computer says we will erect more construction between now and the end of the next century than now exists. And yet, for the most part, we are rushing to build bigger and better cities based on the sterile formula of technology and pure science. Why have we paid more attention to blueprints and not blue people? Where are the dreams of yesterday? What are the priorities of today? What is tomorrow? The idea of creating a perfect city has evolved over the decades. Until to date, the idea revolves around a plan which could be called the Radiant Garden City. This plan is a mathematical formula that could apply to any city in any country. So for those who would save the city, much energy and concentration has been devoted to what appears to be the problem: the old, the worn out, the outmoded. A 2-ton wrecker's ball is quick to solve this for us, as we destroy our old buildings to replace them with new ones. Man has given this action a name: urban renewal. Urban renewal is as radical as major surgery. It reveals who was left behind when the middle class left. Urban renewal to date has too often left the people with no sense of direction. It has extracted human pride. It has failed to, and possibly is unable to, detect the differences between doling out space in a human filing cabinet and providing the stimulation of self-motivation for human renewal. Urban renewal often reflects the concept of creating a perfect city. Case in point, Brasilia. This is the capital of Brazil. The impression is that of another world, clean, spacious, powerful, an architect's dream. But maybe not a dream shared by people, because Brasilia lacks people. Man seems to be out of place here, and he must feel out of place, for most choose not to live here. Is it too perfect, too powerful? The labors, the time, the money that has gone into Brasilia are unequaled in any single such project in the world. Brasilia of today may be teaching us something of yesterday. For a city to be successful, it has to link the old with the new. That we can't replace all that is known with all that is unknown. That for a city to live, it must have spirit. And the spirit and the thrill of the city is created by generations of activity, not overnight. To destroy a city's architectural legacy is to kill a portion of its security and spirit. This is precious stuff, too valuable to level, impossible to replace. The city of the future will have to include some of the best contributions from the 18th and 19th centuries. It will have to carry forward the spirit of the city. What we are learning from mistakes made in urban renewal is that when an institution neglects to satisfy human needs, that institution fails. Real and lasting change comes when the people who are responsible for the welfare of the community play the active role in deciding its future. It's time that we recognize that a city in concept is, after all, a living space filled with people, unwilling and unable to conform to sterile lines of opportunity. The Radiant Garden City theory also provided the overview for the development of today's concept in highway planning. As green belts grew to separate the suburbs from the core area, interconnecting highways and vehicle overpasses were built. This became the plan, and whenever the grid fits, it's applied. The emphasis toward mass production solutions to individual problems has placed man, in the opinion of some experts, as the most endangered species on the planet. We often forget that ecology is not a tangible object or a definable cause. It is a process, an extremely delicate balance in nature that teaches us that everything is interconnected, and tampering with one facet ultimately affects all others. As we destroy other forms of life in the rush to spread more concrete, we are just as surely destroying ourselves.
Gentlemen.
Citizens from every major city in the United States are now protesting the destruction of vital housing, irreplaceable park and marshlands, and historic neighborhoods. Construction projects around the United States, like the proposed Embarcadero Freeway, which would have created a Chinese wall separating San Francisco from its celebrated view, finally mobilized enraged citizens to put a halt to the planned construction. In San Francisco, it was almost too late. In Seattle, Washington, the I-90 and R.H. Thompson projects confirm the continuing struggle between the people the bulldozers would displace and the monotonous momentum of highway building. Some propose that technology should be stopped, that the most significant thing designers, engineers, and architects could do would be to stop working. Technology in its pure sense is neutral. It receives its stimulation from the needs of people, and it'll be the people who will change its direction, mold its application. Possibly we have found it too easy to look to someone or something for cosmetic solutions to the growing pains of isolation. A quick look in retrospect may help us understand why we are where we are today.
New horizons. In a restless search for new opportunities and new ways of living, always to find that old horizons opened the way to new horizons, with its promise of the unseen and its promise of the unknown, has forever fathered the impulse to seek for new things in new places. New horizons, roads for men to go places, new things to do, and new ways to do them. Telephone, electric lights, automobiles, aircraft, all are symbols of better living. With a growing appreciation of the wisdom of applying the road tax monies to the road building program for which they were designed, highway development is going on at a rapidly increasing pace. Created by the crossing of new horizons, new ways of living and new thinking have laid the foundation for most of what is good in life today. with the promise of more tomorrow. As distant families have become neighbors, and as people have constantly widened their viewpoints while multiplying the number of their contacts, more desires have developed to be satisfied.
With the hopes of prosperity for every citizen, consumer products fill the stores of every city in America. Out of it all, a symbol, the car, with its ability to mobilize people, became the pride of the nation. It embodied all the social, economic, and creature comforts into one happy machine. It provided a degree of distinction and isolation from one social class to another, while at the same time providing a degree of distinction for all. In addition to a transporter, the consumer car became an alter ego, an economic reinforcement among peers, an escape into a fanciful life. In a sense, the car made the man. In this age of prosperity for one and for all, the auto industry became the largest business in the world, and America the largest consumer nation. As every store became filled with partially successful brands, the manufacturers of the Me Too products clung to the hope that they could develop a brilliant advertising campaign which would lift their product into the winner's circle. The attempts to persuade people to buy things they don't need with money they don't have in order to impress others that don't really care is becoming much less profitable. It appears now that the consumer citizen, who has been left out of the economic equation and upon whom the myths of more is better and big is best have been perpetrated, is beginning to support his real needs, and the successful manufacturer is going to understand this. For some 30 years, America has been secure in its economic position in the world. Yet this same security has now nurtured greater introspection. This self-analysis, coupled with the increasingly widening gap between products and basic needs, has led to a somewhat undefined yet very real social change in the United States. People are less willing to give up their name for a number or their identity for a force which is seeking economic efficiency. People are more concerned with personal relationships. We are leaning on the past, reaching back for some of the basic ideas and ideals that were left behind, which are now reappearing, but in a little different context. There are those who still cling to the hope that priorities will return to normal, but today's society is experiencing a combination of apathy and hope, and there is a new direction in social responsibility emerging. Today, because of the changing social values, more people are willing to share the burden of urban life and are now turning to logical alternatives to past performances. From the momentum of this search for new personal priorities comes the requirement that urban life must succeed and the demand that once again urban transportation successfully serve its community. Yet since 1954, 300 transit companies have been abandoned. 3/4 of these companies were in communities of less than 50,000 people. Average fares on public transportation vehicles are now 3 times what they were in 1950, and passengers 3 times fewer. It is generally agreed that urban transit cannot pay for itself on passenger revenues alone. Urban transit is finally being looked upon as an essential public service like fire and police protection. Part of this is because government has traditionally supported other forms of transportation in one way or another. We gave land to the railroads, built lighthouses, canals, highways, airports, all at public expense. Although some efforts have been made over the last 20 years to cope with the public transportation problem, it was not until the Urban Mass Transportation Assistance Act of 1970 was passed that urban transportation was able to make any real strides toward improvement. $10 billion were allocated to be spent over a 12-year period, but the ultimate cost estimated by UMTA lies in the $30 to $50 billion range. The first emphasis for UMTA has been on saving and improving existing systems. followed by the building of new systems. New systems, as seen at Transpo 72, offer the opportunity for greater convenience, more speed, and more efficiency. The lightweight air-conditioned cars with full carpeting, tinted windows, and more comfortable seats are deliberately designed to compete with the comfort and allure of the automobile. Each new acceptable step in technology will help make public transportation more desirable. Linear induction and air cushion modes, computerized routes and demand systems can all stimulate patronage. The urban transit system's importance to a community is a major factor for all city officials who are already faced with many problems. They must provide an efficiently balanced transportation system, yet they are faced with the emphasis toward high speed, long-range systems which could continue to lead people away from the core area, leaving an even greater tax burden on those left in the city. Efforts on the part of local, regional, and federal governments and businesses are going to play a very decisive role in enabling public transportation to meet its responsibilities. But the role for those in the public transportation business is even more important. Their perspective must be urban and must focus on human renewal. The people will go for urban transportation at their own speed, with their own free will. There are human, personal, emotional considerations that can have more immediate impact and influence on success than horsepower, load capacity, or computerized routes. Understanding what at times seems totally illogical, the ideas, feelings, and attitudes of people, is the path to effective market positioning and achievement. This is true especially for the system that is 10 to 15 years away, or the city that will never need the high-speed mass transit system. There are some people who will ride transit regardless of its image or the quality of the service offered. These people are commonly referred to as captive riders. Here, economics is the deciding factor. This then reserves transit for our poor, our handicapped, our old, and our young. This isn't good enough. The idea that intercity citizens can be consigned to second-class transportation is not valid. City planners and political leadership must not consciously or unconsciously plan or present second-class systems. Since public transportation's business is serving people, the industry must understand the marketing importance of positioning, based upon an honest appraisal of what public transportation really is.
Very poor. It's like non-existent as far as...
Positioning is the emotional categorizing of a product or service by the consumer mind.
You never ride on the bus?
Not anymore.
Positioning means putting a product in a favored category of attitude and importance.
But I know that just because my car isn't working.
Positioning means to know what makes the customer tick and how to satisfy his needs. Positioning takes into consideration not only the strengths of the product, but the weaknesses as well.
Most people really are prejudiced against riding buses.
But I mean,
However, positioning cannot be approached through the eyes of management, unions, or politicians alone. It must be approached, more importantly, through the eyes of the people the system serves. And it must give thought to the product itself, in the terms of today's attitudes and social ideas.
Because there has to be some experts in the transportation field.
There's a new look through the Seattle public transit system. Andy Reynolds reports.
it's called a people bus, and it's designed to make people more aware of buses. It's the brainchild of the city and Washington Transit Advertising. They hope its colorful design will lure people.
There is no one answer to changing negative or indifferent attitudes toward public transit. All factors are related. All factors are, in one way or another, observed by the people in the community. Consider the vehicles themselves. They must be symbols of positive thinking. Cleanliness, repairs, colors, bus stop signage, and the quality and significance of transit advertising represent at a glance to what degree the system believes in the future.
Bus driver Frank Lesh enjoying every minute.
And also the Seattle Department of Transportation, all buses are people buses.
It is obvious that in many cities, these factors are misunderstood or are being ignored deliberately. All too often, while a transportation system sees itself in one way, the public sees it in another way. Granted, complicated design and quality signage means more time, more money, more care. Yet we know that positive identity requires a high level of effort and creativity.
West Elman commented on it and its place in the whole transportation scene.
There's only one real answer to solving the transportation problems of the central cities, and that, of course, is mass transit or public
The ultimate
transportation.
attempt at communications is to try to relate as closely to a one-to-one basis as possible. Customers and employees have to be looked upon and treated as the solution rather than the problem.
It gives passengers a chance to ride and read or just chat with others and forget about all those traffic tangles. And like the others too, Cliff, it replaces some 60 automobiles a day during rush hour.
The communication approach for public transportation to date has either overreacted to the criticisms of a few, and as a result they've affected no one, or communication programs have been designed superficially and in haste. This is why, to a large extent, advertising or marketing per se has failed to be of any real long-range assistance to the industry.
How about it, Ed? Do you miss being Captain Midnight?
I sure do, Gary. I miss the devotion the kids gave us.
Oh, certainly
It's
hundreds
worth
of thousands
remembering
of
that
kids join your
everything
secret
is
club.
personally related. To contrive a cosmetic program that claims the greatest service going when it isn't, or broadcasts a fleet of beauty liners when they aren't, or calls bus drivers coach captains or coach engineers, not only embarrasses employees, but further depletes the chance of public acceptance.
Well, it's not so easy anymore, Gary. In 25 years, the public has been force-fed so many different products that you can't remember all the names.
Yeah.
But the successful businesses today still generate a loyalty by operating under a pattern of respect and obligation to the community. They have
Advertising in general has gotten out of the habit of just leveling with people. We have to remember that platitudes and ad talk are not automatically accepted.
Our sons and daughters are working hard to reopen it with old-fashioned communication.
If advertising has a real future, it will be related to basic issues which help expand the individual, not only the economy. We need knowledge to know where to employ the creativity to satisfy the public's now needs. We need the honesty to avoid presenting public transportation as what it is not.
We better hurry.
Why?
Like we used to say on radio, we're a little late, folks.
There exists a very real hope for public transit because it has the ability to do more than transport. Public transportation can bring people together, to teach by association rather than isolation, that social satisfactions can be experienced and be enjoyed in the city. The future of public transportation depends on a partnership between honest, individualized, planned, people-oriented communication and integrated, not superimposed technology. To succeed, those responsible for the survival of public transportation must acknowledge they are part of an even larger challenge, to make our cities livable again. Public transportation strategy is truly part of a larger urban strategy. Public transportation must be brought to a position of significance and leadership in the community. Understanding who we are and who we are talking to, followed by careful selection of a relevant, truthful message, is as important as the communication process which follows. The year was 1939. People gathered at the New York World's Fair to see what the world of 1960 would bring. The beautiful things that were seen in the year of 1960 turned from a realization of that dream to the start of the realization that the direction of the dream was wrong, that technology is a neutral thing, that in itself it does not bring beauty. We found along the way that mankind and pure science didn't necessarily mix. Not yet, anyway.
Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. And hang on your head.
This is Jimmy Fiddler in Hollywood, where Marlene Dietrich may not be a jitterbug, but she has neat feet and pip hips.
Hi, Archie. What do you want? Come on out right away, Jughead. It's a matter of life or death.
Better come running. It's old Spine Ed and his bust-up brown gang.
Presenting Mandrake the Magician.
Don't touch that dial. Listen to...